I was so focused on the conversation. At some point, he turned and asked me, Karen, am I boring you? And I said, no, keep on talking. Karen is this happy, jovial, boisterous person, full of life. I think I'm adventurous, fun-loving, I guess, and yeah. That's Karen in a nutshell. I come from a big family of 7, father, mother, happy people. We grew up in Kisumu, we grew up in Nairobi, so I've grown up in 2 cities, plus the village, of course, because my father ensured we were so grounded in that village. My family are very outgoing. Anyone who's met any of them will tell you we are all chatty. My best memory is sitting on the dining table, and my mom would say that neighbors know we are eating because we are silent. That's the only time the house was silent, because we all talk, we are all talkative, we are all happy. My dad would say he's a witty guy, but as a child I think he was a tyrant. He ruled over us, you know, the real African father, but deep inside he was a loving guy. He ensured we got everything we needed. My mom, on the other hand, was the judge and prosecutor, and also your advocate. So if you're in trouble, we all counted on my mom to tell my dad what we had done, and then she would pass the sentencing. If it's kuchapwa viboko tatu, then my dad would execute. So that was my mom. But my mom was this happy, I think she knew herself, and she was just a happy person deep inside. She was always singing, and she loved herself. I tell people my mom, every night before she slept, she'd shower, oil herself, powder herself, then get into bed to sleep. You'd think she's going somewhere. So my mom was this happy person, and she was my friend. And I think when I remember my mom, she was always the most understanding person you'd ever meet. So a good thing and supportive. So I'll give you a scenario. When we're in campus, my friends and I would go partying and would all crash at our house. So for my mom, she was like, let me know who's the man in your life at that campus stage. Let me know who's your boyfriend. Come home together. Let's sleep all together, you know. So she'd throw the mattress out for us to sleep on this mattress. So that, one, she knows you're safe, you're not having sex at that stage, because all of me and my 7 friends are sprawled in her sitting room with my sister sitting on a mattress. So that was my mother. Then my mom had been unwell for a while. She had a unique liver condition. And so she was always in and out of hospital. She needed blood and all that kind of thing. But she had beaten this for a long, long time. So I never thought she would die. I guess I had blocked that part. So then my mom dies. And my mom's death was one of those moments that I would say is a turning point in my life. A moment that shook me to my core. Because my mom was this dependable person. She had all solutions. In whatever trouble you were in, you knew if you called Mother, she would get you out of that trouble. And then here she is dead. So I went through her funeral like a zombie, I think. I just went through the motions. And remember, 4 months or 3 months earlier, Brian had died. So we had just buried my big brother, who was the fun, loving person. It was my good friend. Then here I am burying my mother. And so my mother's death left me questioning God. I questioned if there's really a God who can take a brother and a mother, who can strike a family twice. And this led me into realizing a few things. After my mom died, I went wild, of course, with grief and tried to cope in all manner of ways. But when I came out of that pain, I started asking myself, why did I survive and my mom died and my bro died? Is there something bigger than me? And then I realized that in this moment, family was the most important thing, and that we had to have authentic relationships within our family. So fast forward, my mom is dead, I've been an escapist, then I come to work in Safaricom, and in between I meet Bob Collymore. I meet this authentic guy, this guy who believes in family. And at this point, I didn't know this about Bob when I first met him. When I first met Bob, all we discussed was the sustainability report, where are we? And I remember every time my boss would ask him, Bob, rate us where we are, and he'd say 4 out of 10. And I'd be so disappointed because I had put in blood, sweat, tears to do this thing. And so with time, would sit and have very many chats with Bob on sustainability. But the most interesting point happened when I was pregnant. So I was pregnant, I was big, huge, and I went to see Bob with my boss and we were seated. And when the meeting ended, I couldn't stand up because this sofa had an incline, and if you're pregnant, 86 kilos, trying to lift yourself from that sofa is impossible. And so Bob turned, saw me struggling, he laughed, he actually looked at me, laughed, and then said, "Come here." So he pulled me from the seat. And when he pulled me, he looked at me and said, "Karen, when you get this baby, I have carried you and the baby, please bring the baby to me." So I didn't take it serious. I assumed, this is just Bob being friendly. And I left, got my baby. I got my baby May 2015. So come Feb 2016, I meet Bob and he's like, "Where's the baby?" And I was like, "Oh man, you're serious." So I had to organize to bring my baby to meet Bob. So I brought all the babies in the family. So I brought my firstborn son, the baby Bob had helped carry as I was pregnant, and my niece. And at this point, I realized that this guy really believes in family, because our conversations after that would never end before he'd ask me, "How are the children?" And he knew them by name. And he'd call them Theo and Thierry. "How are they? What are they up to?" And I remember he'd even asked me, "Did you enjoy the maternity 4 months policy? Are you taking advantage of the flexi?" You know? And I realized indeed this guy deeply and authentically cares for family. And so that was the kind of relationship we had with Bob. Along the way, I think one of my last conversations with Bob was just before, it was around a month before he passed on. And I had gone to ask or brief him on the sustainability report, his part, the CEO's message. And we had such a good time talking about, if I look back now, he was in a reflective mode. So he'd say what he thinks he did well, like the women agenda. He'd say he's proud of the new projects that are coming up, and he'd say he's happy that his leadership team is on board, but maybe you should have brought them earlier. And so we had all these discussions, and at some point we stopped discussing work and we started discussing him. And I asked him, "So tell me about this disease you have." And so he went into detail to explain to me the treatment he was doing, what was happening, and so on and so forth. But because I was so focused on the conversation, at some point he turned and asked me, "Karen, am I boring you?" And I said, no, keep on talking. And at this point, Marian, the assistant, came in to say, "The next person is here." But we both ignored Marian and carried on talking about family, about my children. And I remember telling him, nowadays, the academic system, you can't be a passive parent, you have to be there. So for instance, I kept on saying my son's school expects me there for teacher-parent meeting. There's all these, come see how your baby is in school. And he turned and said, "That's why we have flexible time." And I noticed again that indeed Bob believed in the policies that he had put here in Safaricom. So for me, I would say Bob was an authentic person, and he was true to himself, and he was very passionate in what he believed in. I think Bob would have wanted us to touch people's lives in a very meaningful way. And when I reflect back on my mom, this was my mother. When we were growing up, our house always had these relatives. And as a kid, it irritated me, because all the time you had to leave your bed for this new relative who's come to visit. And I feel for Bob, he authentically touched lives in the way he lived, in what he did, and he had a legacy to build and a purpose. And I see that when I reflect back on my mom's journey, my mom also had a purpose. And that's what she did. Other than taking care of me and my campus friends, I'm sure everyone in my family, in the village, they all had things to say about my mom when she passed on. The way she had touched their lives, the way she tried to make everyone's life a little better than those who met her. And so for me, when I look at myself, I always ask myself, "Karen, what's your purpose here?" Bob has done his life, he's gone. My mom has done her life, she's gone. What about me? What will my children say? And this is a journey I've been on, and I realized I want to leave the world just a little better than I found it. And if I can do that, I'd be happy. So I do this for future generations, in my personal life and in my career life at Safaricom as a sustainability person.